Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We had a pretty meaningful Thursday night of college football in three locations. Otherwise, 48-3, 45-0, 65-0, 70-0, whatever the scores elsewhere told us very little about a lot of major teams across the country. But in three locations, we can gather something that is meaningful, and I enjoyed the action because in those three locations, we had competitive games and some interesting outcomes. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. It's Monday through Friday, every day, weekday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We started after conference media days. We have vowed to be here through the national championship game. So that Tuesday, we will be here, Lord willing. And after that, we will decide. We have released a programming update, so please check it out, even though it is me talking for 4 minutes, even though it is boring, even though it is basically non-football related on the field. Of course, it's about our programming in season. So check it out. We have posted that video on every channel. Of course, it's the lowest performing video on every channel, but I mandated that we post a programming update with me going down the lineup of our in-season programming schedule. So please check it out because it runs Sunday through Saturday every week with tons of good stuff and a number of new offerings here at the Voice of College Football. The Amazon links in the description section of all the videos. Please use the Amazon link when you do your shopping because it's the same shopping experience for you. Why would you not use it? It does not change for you in any such way, and Amazon keeps track of everything that you do, unfortunately. Big tech is keeping track of us, period, but this is no different than you using Amazon link that you typically use versus using the link that we provide. It's the same shopping experience, and guess what? Why send them every penny when you can send 3, 4, 5% to the Voice of College Football? All right, the schedule for today. Don't know about an Oklahoma show. We know that the Sooners play Temple tonight to open up their era as an SEC team. So Oklahoma plays tonight against Temple. We know that. We typically do an Oklahoma show with Jason Ray every Friday. Don't know if that's going to come together this week. That depends on Jason's schedule. But we do have a Clemson live show at 5:30 Eastern. Check it out. Of course, Clemson faces Georgia. The most daunting task in college football as it stands right now belongs to Dabo Swinney, Cade Klubnik, and company at Clemson, taking on the Georgia Bulldogs at noon Eastern on Saturday. And we've got the postgame show lined up for tonight, Friday, and Saturday night as well, right here at the Voice of College Football. And keep in mind that all these team channels that you see with all the weekly shows, including this one with the daily show, you can find those on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon Audio. So if you would like to listen and not look at me, hey, if you've always wondered, if I could only listen to Mark and listen to the guests, listen to the callers, and not have to look at Mark, that would be the perfect college football show. Well, we've got the perfect college football show for you. Catch us on your favorite audio platform, if that involves Spotify, Amazon, or Apple. I believe those are the three. All right. Do appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We've got a couple of guests stopping by. Of course, as you can see on the bottom of the screen, our deal is we guarantee 1 hour. We are here for 1 hour, Monday through Friday. And of course, we are here a zillion other times, but Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour. And if you would like some overtime, please support the show. Okay. I got 3 things for you. Point number 1 would be there were blowouts everywhere as expected. We had a bunch of 45, 50-point blowouts that coincided with the 45, 50-point spreads. Arkansas gets the win of the night. They are the most impressive team of the night, at least on the scoreboard. Good for them. This will be the end of the Arkansas Pine Bluffs for Arkansas to face this season, although they've probably got one of those late season typical SEC games. I believe they do. It might be UMass, but this is the end of the Arkansas Pine Bluffs for a while for Sam Pittman and Arkansas. Taylon Green and company obviously rolled 70-0. So Arkansas, our salute to you on a Thursday night as posting the most impressive score of the night if you're just looking at sheer numbers. Utah won by a zillion, Illinois by a zillion, Kansas by a zillion, and there were about 5 other teams that had no issue. I took in much of the first half of Rutgers and Howard. Rutgers did have some issues with Howard before they disposed of Howard by 37 points. Okay, those tell us nothing. Unless, hey, if you're a beat writer for Utah or Illinois, one of those teams that won by a zillion, I'm sure going play by play and dissecting whatever the weaknesses were supposed to be or the questions on the team or the emerging players, yes, there was meaningful information. But from a big picture view of college football, nothing to gain from any of those scores. Nothing. Okay. The 3 locations that count: Minneapolis, Boulder, Colorado, Raleigh, North Carolina. Let's start with NC State's performance against Western Carolina. It was obviously uneven because it was a ball game into the fourth quarter. They were trailing by 4 points in the fourth quarter. That's not good for NC State. That's not a good look. And I'm not really into the look at this point, but it's not a good indicator. However, it's not the end of the world. There are teams that have contended for conference championship games and played in conference championship games. You can look it up, that have struggled against FCS teams and against low group of 5 teams. However, it's rare. It's somewhat rare. It is the minority for sure against the teams that have played for conference championship games that have been in contention in November. They typically 90-some% of the time blow out the Western Carolinas of the world. Grayson McCall started for the first time at NC State. I heard a ridiculous statistic in the first half of this game that I tried to follow up on. I could not find or verify this stat. I can't believe it, especially in light of our conversation the other night on the Miami channel about Cam Ward's fumbling issues. Cam Ward lost 8 fumbles last year. I believe he fumbled the ball 14 times last year. He lost 8. That was not his worst season fumbling. A couple of years ago, he fumbled 22 times, something in that range, and lost 14. So Cam Ward's going to have to clean that up. I'm guessing most of that comes in the pocket, not protecting the football in the pocket because he doesn't run much. Anyway, Grayson McCall, this is what I heard out of Grayson McCall. 42 starts at Coastal Carolina. Of course, he transferred or attempted to transfer last offseason and decided to come back to Coastal. And then he did, in fact, transfer to NC State to take over for MJ Morris, who could be the starting quarterback in Maryland. We don't know if that's been announced. Anyway, Grayson McCall, I heard this stat, and I don't know if just the announcers, based on the way they presented it, were talking about him starting his 43rd game in college football and then said that he had 0 fumbles. So my first guess would be that 0 fumbles lost. I can't imagine that Grayson Fumble, yes, has never McCalled the ball, that Grayson McCall has never fumbled the ball. Technically, what I was hearing was he's never statistically fumbled the ball, meaning he's never lost a fumble. I could not verify that, but in 43 starts now, he didn't look great throwing the ball. He looked fine. He looked okay. He looked decent. But he missed a lot of passes downfield. I'm talking about guys running square ins, seam routes, where there's a defender about 3 to 4 yards away, and they're just looking for the football, and he just misses them. He makes them dive. He shoots it over their head. So Grayson McCall's had better days. I know that he is statistically one of the most prolific quarterbacks in recent college football memory. He's just a tick under 70% completion percentage for his career. So I've got to think, number one, he had an off night. Number two, of course, he's played power conference opponents and played last night an FCS team with guys like Casey Concepcion, who's an excellent receiver, and others on NC State, Noah Rogers, the Ohio State transfer. So he had the talent advantage last night, and he was missing guys. So maybe they just need to get on board. As I mentioned prior to the Florida State-Georgia Tech game, take a veteran quarterback, put him on a new team with inexperienced wide receivers. I don't know that that's necessarily the case at NC State. I just mentioned one inexperienced wide receiver in Noah Rogers, even though he's ultra talented, but Casey Concepcion has been making plays at NC State for a long, long time. So that chemistry needs to be worked on there at NC State. Other than that, their defensive front is tremendous. It's got to be one of the best in the ACC, if not the nation. They had arguably their best linebacker be called for targeting and get tossed from the game. I did not agree with the call. I still do not agree with this rule. I cannot believe that this rule has not been addressed yet. So the rule for targeting in regards to determining whether it's targeting, I generally don't have an issue with that. They have made some adjustments to that to make it more player friendly. However, this continued kicking the player out. And then, so we've got two issues here. I don't believe that the player should be kicked out of the half, that they should miss the rest of that half in the next half, because if you're playing, of course, in the first half of a game, you're going to miss the rest of the game. If you're playing in the second half and you commit the targeting, you are going to miss the rest of the game, and then you are going to miss the first half of the next game. The penalty should not carry into another game. Also, the penalty should be consistent from a time standpoint, a series standpoint, or a play standpoint. You could be called for targeting the first play of the game, and you're out for the game. You could be called for targeting on the last play of the first half, and you're going to miss the second half, and so forth. It is not a consistent, it is not enforced consistently. The rule doesn't make any sense in regards to the penalty, the enforcement. It should be a number of defensive plays, number of defensive series, something like that, that is more uniform. Don't get that. That would have to be explained to me as to why that was initially implemented and why it's not been corrected, because we're working on the targeting penalty for how many years in college football? 5, 6, at least. So NC State's got to clean up its act, but they win by 17 points against Western Carolina. Not the end of the world, but they've got a date against Tennessee coming up next week. One of the better weeks of college football in week 2. Maybe the second best game to Michigan, Texas. NC State and Tennessee, I believe, playing a neutral site game. So that should be fun. Let's see who's here. We've got Dominic. We've got Big Ears Bo. Oh, I love these questions. Okay. The long explanation that I'm going to keep short is that I went out and bought the first 5 or 6 helmets. Then I came up with the tried and true idea of allowing the fans to supply me with the rest of the helmets. So I had a P.O. box. So just about most of those helmets came from you. It started with the 2016 college football playoff, and I bought the 4 playoff teams in 2016. Then I bought a couple more. And then I said, hey, you guys supply the helmets, and you have graciously done so. And we did that until the summer of 22. And then I moved and moved and moved and moved. So we took off the P.O. box, and therefore we have not had any helmets delivered since then. We will have to fire up a P.O. box, and you, sir, can send me a West Virginia helmet. Or you can gather up a collection or something. That would be great. I would love to have a West Virginia helmet, and I would put it up there proudly. If we've got our buddy Neil Campbell, the Nevada fan, I wanted to honor him because he has gifted us generously here recently, as I noticed in reviewing one of our college football after dark shows. So what that is our Sunday night show that is driven by you, meaning you're actually on the panel as a YouTube member or Patreon member. And I noticed that our buddy Neil was rather generous this last Sunday night. But Nevada went down in flames in the final 5 minutes of that game against SMU. But that's the deal on the helmets. There you go. I get asked that a couple times a week. Doc, it's funny you say that because actually I eat a ton of chicken. I have never eaten so much chicken in my life than I have over the last couple months because I've come across a couple packaged chickens, chicken meat, chicken, just basically chicken. You fry up, you take about 4 or 5 minutes. It's already prepared and it's supposed to be healthy. And I'm not a big chicken eater because it's dry meat. You got to make it just right. And this is just right. So more chicken consumed by this kid in the last 4 or 5 months than in forever. Mike believes that it was a good win for Colorado against North Dakota State. All right, let's get to that. So point number 1 out of 3 today was North Carolina State not necessarily ready to win the ACC, but they don't have to be in September and certainly not in August. So I've got NC State winning the ACC. Do I believe that they're the best team or am I the most confident? No, I was taking a shot there. Most likely the best team in the ACC after watching Florida State stumble around against Georgia Tech would be Miami 1, Clemson 2, FSU 3, NC State 4. And we'll wait to see about the rest. Okay, let's take it to Boulder and Deion in Colorado. Surviving North Dakota State. North Dakota State, the Bison, an excellent FCS team that going into this game, I believe the record was 9-4. 9-4 against FBS teams. And most of those FBS teams were actually power conference teams. Now, if you're a good power conference program, you should not be messing around with North Dakota State. So let's understand that there are certainly levels to power conference football. There's the elite level, there's the really good level, there is the we're in somewhat competition for a conference championship level, there is the we are just basically baseline 6-6 expectation level, and then there is the various levels of awful past that. So however you want to slice it, there's at least 4 or 5 levels to power conference teams, and North Dakota State hasn't necessarily defeated those kind of teams at the top. So Colorado is probably a pretty bad football team still, probably. They addressed the offensive line. Deion Sanders told us a couple weeks before the game that the offensive line is not bolstered. It's not beefed up. Let's be clear, because Deion was all over this reporter for saying the offensive line was bolstered or beefed up. No, it's improved. Okay, that remains to be seen. Shadur Sanders generally had plenty of time to throw the ball from what I could see. I did not watch the game start to finish. I was all over the place watching NC State, watching Minnesota, North Carolina. I was watching Colorado and North Dakota State. And if I've got a chance, I will go back and watch the game, as I would like to with Minnesota, North Carolina, start to finish. But from what I saw, Shiloh Sanders had plenty of time to throw. I might be wrong. Again, I did not see every drop back out of his probably 40 to 45 dropbacks. But it appeared as though against North Dakota State that the offensive line pass protected. So maybe they're better there. Again, we're going to have to see better competition. Oh, we're getting that Saturday night against Nebraska. Nebraska, I am pretty sure, is a better team than Colorado. Were they last year? Probably not, because they lost the game by 22 points, except they did have Jeff Sims basically gift the game to Colorado. So I would like to see Nebraska with competent, even if Dylan Raiola is not ready to deliver any kind of A performance, just a competent, take care of the football kind of game out of him, make a couple throws downfield. I believe Nebraska is a better team. I believe that Nebraska is a better team outside of like 4 players. And those 4 players are awfully special. And they make Colorado fun to watch. Shiloh Sanders, I see that Carson Beck is considered the best quarterback in college football. I see that Dylan Gabriel is generally considered the second best quarterback in college football. My eyes don't tell me that. My eyes tell me that Shiloh Sanders is better than Dylan Gabriel, maybe not Carson Beck, but Gabriel. I know that he won't put up the kind of numbers, and certainly not the number of wins that Dylan Gabriel will. But the draft status, we know, is much better on Shiloh Sanders' side. Okay, when it comes to this love-hate relationship that the nation has with Deion Sanders and his football program and football team, that's a tough one. I admit that's a tough one, because I have both praised Deion Sanders and I have also criticized Deion Sanders more than any other coach in the country, I would say, since he got this job. Why? Because he does more outlandish things, both positively and negatively. He craves the spotlight, and he does things that are apt to be responded to. So if you take Chris Kleiman and you take Deion Sanders, I'm going to have more to say about Deion Sanders, because all I see are football results out of Chris Kleiman and his Kansas State team. And I just see that he runs a really good football program, and he keeps his mouth shut, and he just runs his football program. So there is little to respond to other than Kansas State's a good football team. They're probably a top 15 to 20 team in the country, and that's what Chris Kleiman is producing at Kansas State. Deion Sanders says things, does things, initiates things, responds to things. So he initiates much of this, probably most of it. He also responds in an outlandish way. And when I say outlandish, that's not necessarily a negative. I mean, he responds, or what he always does is bold. You may admire that. You might be annoyed by that. You might be irritated by that. Most college football coaches that receive criticism, that have their program or their particular team portrayed a certain way that they don't like, typically would address that at their weekly news conference in a very matter-of-fact way, to say, we don't appreciate that. That's not who we are. We don't believe that that journalist or that publication got it right. That's it. We're moving on. We don't pay attention to that, but that was brought to our attention. We reviewed it. We don't like it. We don't agree with that. That's not exactly the story of who we are. That would be the end of it. Deion Sanders. So on the positive side, the guy is one of the greatest American athletes in recent memory. So let's put that to the side, but we'll establish that first and foremost. So that affords him, in some people's eyes, much more leverage, much more fame and attention. To me, I'm going to evaluate him as a football coach because that's what he is right now. He's in the Hall of Fame, college and pro. He is considered one of the greatest of all time. He is that. But if he doesn't win at Colorado and do it in a pretty respectful way, then I'm just going to evaluate that. Deion Sanders is a man of faith. He puts that out there. I appreciate that. Some people are irritated by that. I appreciate it. I would like that stance to coincide with his other speech and his actions. I think that maybe he's misunderstood at times. He has been very forthright about the way he's going to run a college football program, and the way he runs the program is more understandable and it's more accepted today in the era of transfer portal and NIL. And when you see the lack of loyalty from the players, then why not run it as a business? So I understand that. I get that. I don't like some of the comments that he has made. One in particular about Travis Hunter's special. My son's special on offense, my other son on defense. These are the special players. We don't touch them in practice. I don't like to hear that. Okay, the quarterback's the quarterback on any team. Don't touch them. We need them. They're valuable. We've got one starter. We don't have 8 offensive linemen we can rotate. And the nature of the position is physical as an offensive lineman. They need to hit. They need to block. For the quarterback, it's not. We are protecting the quarterback. That's done by everyone. Okay. But, hey, we've got this guy. And maybe it could be understood. He's playing both ways. And he's a remarkable athlete. Travis Hunter, the moment I saw him make any sort of play against TCU in last year's opener, I thought, this guy's incredible. And when I took in the entire game, I thought the guy's incredible. And I don't recall what he did offensively, but defensively was where I gained much of my appreciation. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's a phenomenal player. He's not just a guy that runs fast, has quick twitch, can jump through the moon, all that sort of thing. No, he brings it to the field. He executes. He is obviously a guy that has studied his craft and become a great player. So he took a major step in my eyes toward possibly winning the Heisman Trophy. Now, don't take that out of context. I don't mean that he's the leading candidate or he should win the Heisman Trophy or be considered number one. I just think he got himself out there, national television, everybody watching the game, and he showed who he is. That touchdown grab that he made by the pylon late in the game was pretty remarkable. He was interfered with before the throw, during the throw, while he was engaged with the football, which obviously wouldn't be pass interference at that point, but basically while he just barely got his hands on the ball and still had yet to secure the ball, he was being grabbed and pushed, and he showed tremendous focus, physicality, body positioning, all of that, and caught the football. The guy's phenomenal. He is probably the best athlete in the country. And again, not just from, oh, he's a freak when we work out, his 40 time, his vertical. No, he brings it to the field. So he has combined his athleticism with a technical approach, and he has honed his craft. He does things in the secondary like leave his guys and pick off passes, defend. He's a great player. Shiloh Sanders is an excellent quarterback. And again, he might be the second best quarterback. He might be the best quarterback in college football. I don't think it's a great crop of quarterbacks at the elite level. we looked at this a couple times in the last few weeks when looking at various rankings, including PFF, that the quarterback class is deep, really deep, strong. You can go to 30, 35 out of the 70 power conference quarterbacks and get yourself a decent quarterback. There are a lot of good ones. I don't know that there are any great ones. If Carson Beck is the best quarterback in college football, then this is not a Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, fill in the blank quarterback class, if he's the guy. When it comes to anything that happens off the field, and much of this Colorado situation, Deion Sanders is response to off the field, obviously, if he kept his mouth shut. And I don't say that in a negative way. I'm just talking about if he was the typical, I used Chris Kleiman as an example, college football coach, we would only judge Colorado based on what's going on the field. We would say, this is an all-time great player. Now he's a coach. I can't think of another all-time great player who's become a head coach in college football. Has this ever happened? Somebody, an all-time great player, not of that magnitude. Jim Harbaugh is the best football player I can think of who's been a college football coach. Right? Jim Harbaugh, who was an excellent college football player, finished in the top 4 or 5 for the Heisman one year. A really good one. Not a great all-time college football player, but a really good one. And he was a good, decent NFL quarterback who played for a long time and came within a dropped, trapped, maybe missed call, Hail Mary from taking a team to the Super Bowl. He was a decent NFL quarterback who played for a long time. Anybody in the chat? I can't think of anybody. Mike Ditka never coached college football, did he? Mike Ditka? Thank you, Sonny. But yes, Mike Ditka in the NFL. Talking about college football coaches. No, Kirby Smart. Okay. No. Deion Sanders, Kirby Smart. No, we've got nobody. Harbaugh's the bet. I think I would have come up with the name by now. Yeah. Deion Sanders, well, I'd have to take my arm through the roof into the sky, Jim Harbaugh, and yeah. So this is a completely different situation. But if he was Roger Staubach, if he was Bart Starr, if he was fill in the blank of football, we could think of 1,000. I shouldn't even have named 2 because don't draw a conclusion based on those 2. We could think of any of the 100 greatest NFL players of all time who were also great college players. Jerry Rice. If it was Jerry Rice, he wouldn't talk like Deion Sanders. He would not conduct himself like Deion Sanders. He would not say anything controversial unless he was really pushed and treated differently because he was Jerry Rice, or unduly criticized because he's Jerry Rice. And so it would simply be, this guy is an all-time legend as a player. And now he's a college coach, and we're just dealing with him in terms of wins and losses, how he's building the program. But Deion says all this crap that can be taken in all sorts of ways. Okay, that would be Eddie George. So again, Eddie George doesn't come close to Deion Sanders, but he would wrestle with Harbaugh for, I'd put Eddie George above Jim Harbaugh. Yeah. But then again, Tennessee State. I'm talking about some place that is going to get scrutinized because it's a major program. So again, it's Deion Sanders, Jim Harbaugh way down here as a player. But appreciate you guys at least serving up one other guy, Eddie George. Okay. Again, Eddie George can go 0-12 for the next 3 years and nobody's going to know about it except that he got fired. And that would come up on everybody's news feed for one day and be thought about for 13 seconds. Okay. So we've never seen this before. All the great personal brands in college football, whether that be Nick Saban, Urban Meyer, Pete Carroll, Bobby Bowden, Joe Paterno, those legends were built as college football coaches. Deion Sanders is a one in a lifetime. Think about this. He is a once in history figure in college football. This has never happened before, where a guy is a complete brand unto himself. He is the only one of his kind today, currently, and going through the history of college football. Like if you would equate this to the music industry, you may think that there is a one of a kind, but there are other comparisons where there's like, I can think of about 3 or 4 that supersede everybody else, but at least there's another comparison. In this way, Deion Sanders came to college football as a brand. He already was a celebrity because he was a all-time great college player, all-time great NFL player that ran his mouth so that perpetuated. And if he was just one of the all-time greats, if he was Walter Payton, if he was Tony Dorsett, if he was Lynn Swann, if he was Jerry Rice, if he was Joe Montana, and he just popped up on a couple commercials, but just kind of said his lines and that was it, then he would still come in as, oh, this is an all-time great player. But he's run his mouth, and then he became a TV personality as a spokesman, and then also on ESPN and the NFL Network. So he's been in the spotlight. He's wanted to be in the spotlight. He's put himself in the spotlight, and he talks, and people like to hear what he has to say. So he's outspoken. He's got charisma. So add that on to this legendary playing career, and you have something that, so if he would have just been the legendary player and kept his mouth shut and never been a persona, then it would still be a completely different situation that we've never seen. But on top of that, he's been a persona. So he already is a brand. I don't know if that's healthy for his team and his program. If he could separate that in some way, if he could back off of that. And I try to tread lightly because just because I would conduct myself a certain way doesn't mean that that's the only way to conduct yourself appropriately or professionally. I understand that he comes from a different culture than I do. I take a biblical worldview of things, and I always will. So there are certain things that he has said that even though he's a Christian, that's his faith, and I'm not going to dispute that in any way. That's between him and God. So when he professes that, I don't in any way deny it. I hope it to be true. But I think that he's done a few things, said a few things, been a bit harsh in ways that he has dealt with his team in this program that seems to be not the way to conduct yourself as a college football coach in terms of making this too cutthroat. Now, he could still revamp the entire roster, decide that he did take over a 1-win football team. So the roster did need to be overhauled. but he didn't need to do it in such a way that he did. He did not need to talk about it in such a way. So other than that, I don't have too many issues with Deion Sanders. It was brought to my attention this morning by somebody that most of you know. It was brought to my attention that Shiloh Sanders, and I saw one of these plays. I did not see the other plays, but I saw one of these plays that Shiloh Sanders, at least based on these 4 occasions, and these are 4 different plays just from last night. Based on last night, is a somewhat dirty player. Talented player, aggressive player, nothing wrong with that. I'll cite Davison Igbinosun, the Ohio State cornerback. Extremely aggressive, physical corner. I've not seen him play outside the rules, and if he did, he was called for pass interference or holding, but not after the whistle, not on the sideline, and that's what I saw out of Shiloh Sanders last night. Now, what's the direct correlation there? Who's his head coach? Who's his father? Was he called for any of those? Well, there was one pass interference, which pass interference is pass interference, but it seemed to be a bit of it was an unnecessary late hit that was called pass interference. Well, that was not pass interference, was it? I'm trying to think if he hit him early, which is, of course, pass interference. There was a pass on the sideline. Shiloh Sanders hit the dude, or it was unnecessary roughness, late hit, 15-yard penalty, either way. Anyway, when you put those 4 plays together, not in any way would I think a player to be a dirty player if I saw one of those plays, or if I saw all 4 of those plays over the course of an entire season. But when I saw those in one game, and you only have so many opportunities, it's not like he is carrying the football every play 30 times and he's got the opportunity to face mask a defender, let's say. No, pretty much almost every time he had the opportunity to take a cheap shot at somebody, he did. That's what I saw last night. I've not seen that in the past that I remember. And I saw Colorado play Colorado State last year, TCU, Nebraska. And then, of course, they faded into the sunset and dissipated and ran off the rails. So I did not see them much in October and November. So that's pretty much what I've got to say. Oh, I apologize. I thought we had a caller down here. We've got our guest, Kevin Borba. Kevin.
How are we doing?
Here. I had a couple
Sorry
of callers
about that.
in, and I wanted to finish my soliloquy, and I did not recognize that it was you.
No problem. I have the glasses on today.
for waiting there. We got Kevin Borba on the line from Athlon Sports and Locked On. So I said what I had to say about Colorado. I don't know how much of that you heard.
Yeah.
My basic take on Deion Sanders is Deion Sanders conducts himself in such a way that I don't care for, but I don't disapprove of it because everybody's different. I have disapproved of just certain things. I think he's a little touchy, a little offended. He needs to have thicker skin when it comes to these articles that come out and dealing with those. But again, we're all different, and I cannot expect somebody to have my ethical standards or it's not even an ethical standard, just my approach to the media and so forth.
Yeah,
but,
I think it's hard. Yeah.
I think you outlined this the last time you were on, and then I talked about it a few minutes ago. The guy is completely unique to not just college football today. He is the only one of his kind in the history of the game.
Right. Yeah, I think with Deion Sanders, it's kind of a special case because, and I heard you mention it earlier, he's the most famous college football coach we have. And possibly ever. Even I'm not going to say he's more famous than Nick Saban on a college at the college level in terms of success, but as an individual, resume wise, he's probably the most famous ever. And so we've talked about it. I think we talked about it last time as well. As a media member, right, we have responsibilities to sort of do our jobs the best way we feel is possible. And the reporters that he wouldn't talk to, they did their jobs the best way they felt was possible. And clearly someone in Deion Sanders' camp or Deion Sanders himself didn't approve of that. And so they didn't want to talk to him. And I think that's kind of like the push and shove that we have as media members, or football coaches, football players, whatever it is. They don't have to talk to us at the end of the day. And so I think for Deion Sanders, it's one of those things where he is such a polarizing figure. It is in his contract that he doesn't have to talk to every media member if he doesn't want to, specific ones. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. I know there was a couple times at Jackson State where he wouldn't talk to media members. So it's nothing new. Realistically, if that's his prerogative, that's his prerogative. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think for the people that really, I want to say dislike him in a way, I think we have to remember to separate sort of the personal feelings from just football in general. And so I think a lot of people use their sort of disdain towards him against his team. And then that's where we get all these weird conversations about Colorado. So at the end of the day, I think Deion Sanders is, I don't want to say he's sensitive because I don't know him well enough to sort of jump to that conclusion, but I do think he's shown that he kind of pays attention to what's said. So I'll just leave it like that.
So if you read the articles that are in question that
Yeah.
he has taken offense to,
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
do you think that they were fair?
There was fair points. I'm not going to pretend that there's not, because I do think that some of the stuff that was written was fair. I think it was the level of intensity in some of them, I guess you could say. Like there's specific name calling where I could see why he wouldn't want to talk to them. And I'll share this story. I think I shared it last time, but I'll share it again. My very first year out of after working at the Pac-12 networks, I was covering Stanford, which happened to be David Shaw's final year. And David Shaw's final year did not go well. If you guys don't remember, I think they finished 3-9, and no one was really asking the head coach, "Hey, you've had 2 or 3 seasons below 500. The program is kind of like, the fan base is dwindling. Like you would go to the games, and there'd be more away fans by a lot than there would be home fans in Palo Alto." And so I asked him, "Do you still feel like you should be the head coach at Stanford?" And it was a question that he didn't like. It was a question that kind of changed the dynamic that we had. I wouldn't say we were like going out getting coffee or anything, but we were cordial. Like he from that point on, when I asked him questions, there was like a look over his face, at least in my opinion, where I felt like, ugh, this guy. And so I think every coach in the country has a specific media reporter that they don't love fielding questions from. They either give him short responses or they'll kind of ignore him. I do think some of the name calling was uh, a little forward, I guess, but at the same time, Sean Keeler is a columnist, so it's obviously his job to write an opinion. On the broadcast, I don't know if we all caught it yesterday, but I think, and which I don't know if this was the intention, I doubt it was, but Coach Prime had told, I forget the ESPN broadcasters, I forget their names. He had told them that it was something faith related, where in the sense of it felt like he was making fun of his faith in a way. So I could see if that's how he took it. I could see that's why he didn't want to talk to him. But yeah, I think some of the criticism was fair. It was just the way that it was presented that was a little over the top, I guess you could say, or at least that's why I would assume that Deion Sanders wouldn't want to talk to him.
Yeah. So Deion Sanders will continue to be himself, and that in some way should be admired, that he's his own man and will carry on with whatever truth he believes he needs to lead his personal life and his program,
Mhm.
and this particular team. So the last point I made, before we brought you on, and we appreciate you being here, Kevin,
Yep.
is about Shiloh Sanders. So I
Mhm.
didn't realize this. I watched probably half the game. I was like in and out and watching other games. And I saw one of these plays live, and then somebody sent me a package of 4 plays in which he's riding guys out of bounds. And
Yeah.
I had just stated that if I saw this out of one player over the course of a season, I would just think that they were an aggressive player, or otherwise in the span of one game, I got to
Yeah.
think that he pretty much took almost every opportunity he could to take some fairly dirty shots.
Yeah, I think it's tough. Shiloh is a very physical player. We saw it all last year where he, I think he finds joy in like the hard hit, regardless of how hard it will hit him as well. And so I saw the same clip, I'm assuming, on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days, and the plays were definitely questionable. I'm not going to disagree. I think the coaches will probably, once they catch wind of that and go over on film, just bring it up. I can't honestly say that I remember him doing that a lot last year. Um, I don't I don't think, or at least I didn't catch it, and so that's kind of the hard thing. Like, so for me, this feels like a one off. Like, this feels like a one time incident. Obviously, it happened all in one game, but it's one of those things where I don't condone throwing people into the bench on the sidelines, but maybe he was just a little too amped up for the first game, I guess. I haven't seen him do it in more than one game. If it was like a more than one game incident, I feel like I would be able to provide more insight on it. But I don't remember this happening more than once. So it is a little it was a little odd to see those four plays strung together. And especially Colorado put a lot of emphasis on discipline this offseason because they had a lot of penalties last year. So I'm not really sure why he would take so many chances to draw a penalty. I know he got called for forgot, I think it was unsportsmanlike conduct on one hit. But yeah, I don't know if I can't say it's dirty, I guess, yet.
Yeah, again, if I saw this collection of plays from one player over the course of a season, I would just think they're an aggressive player, and over 12 games, this
Yeah.
is what happened. But it seemed like he took, I can't
Right.
imagine that he had that many more opportunities to do what he did.
Right.
So he took
Yeah.
about every opportunity. And aside from and I don't remember, and I just stated this, whether it was a pass interference or it was a late hit. I don't remember if he knocked the dude down before the pass arrived or if it was a late hit. But regardless, it was with kind of the same intent. But the other ones were riding guys out of bounds and just
Yeah.
continuing to ride them out of bounds.
Yeah,
And
I think it's like a lack of discipline. We'll call it that for now. We'll say he's not as disciplined as he needs to be at the moment. Um, if this continues on, then I think we sort of venture into that dirty player range. But I feel like we need a bigger sample size than just one game. Especially, I imagine someone's going to talk to him about it. Like, I don't think he's going to be able to just go unscathed for, because Colorado, the next time they play is next Saturday against Nebraska. So I imagine it's going to come up somehow. If he were to do this against Nebraska and if this became like a repeatable act, then I think we'd have to sort of consider it dirty or along those lines. But yeah, it was a little bizarre. I'll call it bizarre for now because it's like, we know, one, the game was never close enough to really, like, not that you ever want to get dirty, but Colorado is always within a touchdown or within a field goal. So it's like, why would you want to help them out even more? So really bizarre situation, very undisciplined on his part. And so I imagine he'll be talked to. And if it happens again, then I think we start to really ask the question.
yeah, and again, like you, I didn't come across anything last year, didn't hear of anything, see anything. And I can't imagine if you didn't, that this has ever come up before. So we'll just have to wait and see. Maybe there were words and jawing between he and a
Yeah.
particular player, and that doesn't condone it. But at the same time, when I was 20 years old, would that have caused me to act like that? Probably.
Yeah.
So there we go. The offense with Shiloh Sanders running the controls, it's not like they completely exploded with a scoring fest of 50 points, but they did put up 500 yards. They did have that crazy interception at the goal line that most likely would have produced a touchdown if it wasn't for a North Dakota State player doing push-ups on the ground and the ball kicking off his calf.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty effective offensive game. So what are your thoughts about Shiloh Sanders and the offense?
Yeah, I think the offense, the passing attack is exactly what I was expecting it to be. I think especially when it comes to North Dakota State, I feel like a lot of people who weren't familiar with their game were expecting Colorado to either just like absolutely torch them or really struggle. And I think the passing game, they did their job, right? Like you mentioned, they had the fluky interception, which for Shador Sanders, he doesn't turn the ball over much. And I think two of his three picks last year were off of tips. So like that's just if you're gonna force a turnover on Shador Sanders, that's probably what you need is a little luck and some flukiness. But passing attack was really good. Jimmy Horn had a career day. Travis Hunter obviously had 3 touchdowns, and after the game, he revealed that he told Coach Prime, "Hey, just give me the ball and we'll win this game." And so that seemed accurate. The offensive line, way better than last year. Only gave up 1 sack, and honestly, I think it was probably Shador's fault on the sack. So we'll go like a half and half in that direction. The rushing attack was worrisome. I know North Dakota State kind of makes their bread and butter off of defense and slowing down the run, but Power 14, new offense line, big physical guys. I was expecting to see a little more than what we got out of the run game, but the passing attack was there, offense line was there, and I think when in doubt, it doesn't hurt to throw the ball at Travis Hunter.
Oh my goodness, this guy's the best athlete in the country, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, no, he is. It's one of those things where I talk about it on my show all the time where it's like I think they need to preserve him, but then he goes out there and it looks like he's never tired. So it's like what am I talking about?
They went through the regiment of post-game and pre-game treatments that he receives to try to keep himself fresh and healthy and rejuvenated and all those things. So it's quite an ordeal, but it's justified. And with that kind of workload, yes, it's justified. 112 snaps per game last year, and I don't know how many he played last night, but it's
I think it was close
phenomenal.
to 100. It was close to 100.
Yeah.
I think he had about 55 on, or maybe it was over 100. I think he had about 55 on offense, about 45 on defense, or flip that. Let's see if I can find it. But yeah, he's a freak. You know, he's one of those guys where anytime he's on the field, he could change the game. And it's one of those things where every team wishes they have him. Every team wishes that they could just throw a guy out there and he dominate on both sides of the ball. He played um, nearly 80 snaps yesterday is what X is telling me off a quick search off to the side. So yeah, when you have someone who could be your best receiver and then all of a sudden he could lock down the other team's best receiver, it's truly you're spoiled is what it comes down to. It's interesting to see how they'll continue to use him down the rest of the season, though, because obviously one game compared to 11 more is going to be tough.
And the entire defense stepped up in the second half, played a good ball game. I don't know why they opted to throw the ball with 90 seconds on the clock on first down when they were trying to just run out the clock and win the game. But they threw a
Yeah,
pass that allowed North Dakota State to get the ball back with what turned out to not be enough time. But they took a couple shots at the end zone, of course, or took one shot at the end zone, got the Hail Mary down inside the 5-yard line. So there was a minor scare there, although it was pretty obvious that he wasn't going to make it to the end zone
right.
when he caught the football. So how does all of this for you project to a trip to Nebraska against the team that I would say is better in just about every conceivable way, except Colorado's got these 3 or 4 guys that might be better than anybody Nebraska has. They probably are. And
Yeah,
and they can if everybody else holds it together and the lines hold their ground on both sides
mhm.
of the line of scrimmage, that these 3 or 4 guys can win games.
Yeah, I think because there was a few game management things yesterday where I was just like, that's not what I like. There was a 4th and 1 play where they call it run play, but they're doing it out of the shotgun or the pistol. I don't remember exactly, but it's like, why not just put Shador Sanders under center and get the 1 yard? You're in. I think they were at their own 35.
Saw
Or if
that.
you don't want Shador to take an unnecessary hit, they brought in 2 quarterbacks, this or 3 quarterbacks actually, from the portal, all of which are mobile or semi-mobile. They're all pretty big guys. One of them 6'5". Try him in there for a play. Tell him to, hey, you're going to reach over for a yard, get us a first down, and that's your role. You're our wildcat quarterback, or you're our power quarterback. We saw North Dakota State do it a couple times. I thought Colorado could have done it. The late pass was very head scratching to me. I was blaming Pat Shermer at first, but based on what Shiloh Sanders said to the media, it sounds like he was the one that switched the play there. And so he said it was a learning experience for him. I think that's the at least second most notable time that he's done that. There was a time against USC last year where Colorado, I'm assuming he forgot they didn't have timeouts, but he started calling, he called a couple run plays when they were trying to drive down the field and score to win the game, and they did not have timeouts, so the clock just kept running. And so I think it's a learning experience for Shiloh Sanders. In terms of Nebraska, I think I need to see Dylan Raiola play, right? I know he's the heralded all whatever at quarterback, number one recruit and all this, but haven't seen him play against a college defense yet. Is he going to live up to the hype right away, or is that environment going to be too much for him? I imagine he'll be just fine, but Colorado, like you said, they have 3 or 4 players where they kind of swing games. So if Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, Jimmy Horn, or whoever one of the other receivers is making big plays, like anything could happen, right? As long as Colorado could score on offense, I think anything's possible.
And we've seen it a couple times already in college football where veteran quarterbacks, I'll take DJ Uiagalelei and then I'll take Grayson McCall last night, are put together with inexperienced receivers. And even though they've worked with those guys during the offseason, first game, they're disconnected. It doesn't come together. So Dylan Raiola, being a completely inexperienced quarterback, is only going to have one game with his receivers. Maybe there are some issues there on the Nebraska side. Their passing game was atrocious last year.
Right.
Now we know that they've revamped it, but still they lost their best offensive lineman as well in August camp. That maybe this is a bit dicey. I don't know what the line on this game is. I couldn't even. I'm usually good at guessing those, but I wouldn't even.
Let's hear a guess. I'll pull
okay,
it up.
my guess is going to be. I'm usually confident in making these guesses, but I would say Nebraska's a 5.5 point favorite.
That feels right. Let's see. ESPN took their odds down, so we're going to go to FanDuel because honestly, I think that Nebraska was favored for the longest time. I remember that. So we're going to – oh, they took the odds down. Of course they did. Okay, I guess we don't get to see because everyone took the odds down. Well, I think it was around there. I think it was like a 1 touchdown, 1 field goal kind of favorite. I think Nebraska gets the benefit of the doubt because they're at home, right? And so – it's one of those things where it's a hostile environment. I don't know if Colorado has played in an environment that, well, they did play it at Oregon last year, but that game got out of hand quickly. So I don't know if they played in a hostile environment like that, where I think it could be a close game, right? So if it comes down to it and you got 100,000 fans screaming, are you able to sort of fight through and block out the noise? Yeah, everyone took down their odds for Colorado, Nebraska. So I am assuming they want to see Nebraska play against UTEP this weekend, and then they'll sort of revert back. But I do think it was around 3.5, 5.5 points. So that feels right.
Nebraska is a 4 touchdown favorite against UTEP on Saturday. Got Kevin Borba here from Athlon Sports and Locked On Network. Kevin, would love to have you back sometime next week when you know a little bit more about you've had time to digest this game, look ahead to Nebraska. Figure some things out there, and we see Nebraska play on Saturday. Would love to have you back to prep one of the biggest games of week 2, and let people know where they can find you and what you've got going on.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter or X at Kevin_Borba. I'm over at Athlon Sports covering all things college football. Kind of dove into the late game stuff that Deion Sanders talked about, and then a little PJ Fleck stuff because people hate him already. It's only 1 game in, and people are not thrilled with the lack of change. And then I'm over on Locked On Buffs every single day covering Colorado and the madness that is.
Yes, I guess I got a hit on PJ Fleck. I didn't get to that before we sign off today because I got a few things to say there.
Yeah. So have a good one. Thanks for having me.
Kevin, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. Have a good day.
Yep.
Good stuff out of Kevin Borba. Locked On Athlons covering Colorado. We'll have Kevin on next week to preview Colorado taking on Nebraska. That should be fascinating. And here at the Voice of College Football, we have hit the overtime, but you'll get some free overtime out of me. Here we go. PJ Fleck's an excellent football coach who may have worn out his welcome at Minnesota. This is going to be what's going to take place pretty often around college football. College football coaches in recent memory, and then going forward, not that there's not going to be an exception, are not necessarily going to be coaching at institutions for 20 years. And PJ Fleck, I don't believe, is any worse of a football coach. He's too intelligent of a guy and too aware and too seeking of knowledge and improvement to not be a better coach today than he was in 2019. He's in a tough spot in Minnesota. He needs to be held responsible and accountable for losing. He's had one bad season. We're looking at a schedule and a result last night that leads us to believe that there's going to be 2 consecutive bad seasons. I find it difficult to project that Minnesota can do better than PJ Fleck. Not that he shouldn't be criticized, not that he should not be held accountable by guys like myself and the fan base at Minnesota. However, again, I don't know too many guys that are going to produce 11-2, 9-4, 9-4, 3 consecutive years. And then, yes, he had a down year at 6-7. It's not portraying to be a good season this year after a missed kick on Thursday night against North Carolina. It may be time for PJ Fleck to move on. Most likely, this team's going to be 4-8 or 5-7 this year, unless things drastically change. Can't find a quarterback. That's an issue. Ethan Kalkimanis, from everything we can see by watching him, and now we're going to see it play out at Rutgers, is a talented thrower of the football, has a gun. When I say talented thrower, I should separate arm strength from arm talent. He has a strong arm. He has an upper echelon arm strength component. He's not necessarily a talented thrower, nor did they present Ethan Kalkimanis with the type of offense where he could thrive. It's an antiquated, outdated passing offense at Minnesota. However, was PJ Fleck choosing to run an antiquated passing offense, or was he matching the personnel with the scheme and determining we play in the Big Ten Western Division? Look at Iowa, look at Wisconsin, look at what they've done, look at how successful they've been, look at my limitations in personnel and recruiting. I will need to play like them, and the results were pretty favorable. He did not win a Big Ten Western Division championship. That is about all that he did not accomplish since he started at Minnesota that you may have expected him to be able to accomplish at least one time. Northwestern, for example, was able to do it twice. PJ Fleck, much more consistent than Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern has been over the last 5 or 6 years, his final 5 or 6 at Northwestern, but was not able to peak and win that division championship. And now, forget winning a Big Ten championship. It's about maximizing their resources, their recruiting, the NIL, and trying to find a way to get players, because I believe that this university, and therefore this football program, is the most isolated football program in the country, not from people. They play in a major market, a major city, but they are the most isolated from the rest of college football and high school football players. It's a difficult place to recruit to, and there are not enough players in their entire region. Nebraska coaches have talked about a 500-mile radius, meaning we can dip into Texas and we can go out to Illinois and get some football players, and we can possibly go get that state of Utah that produces some decent football players. But Minnesota, wow. So let's understand that there's a perception that comes along with fickle fans responding to results and responding to various things and taking that to the nth degree, like with Florida State last weekend. And much of it's fun. So I separate the fun from the reality. The fun is if fans want to make fun of Florida State after they trip up after this entire offseason of whining and kicking and screaming to get out of the ACC, and then they want to pile on Florida State and make fun of Mike Norvell and Florida State for tripping up overseas and taking this long trip just to lose to Georgia Tech, from a fun standpoint of trolling, go at it. But if you are realistically evaluating a football program, you know that Florida State's not an elite program. They weren't before they boarded the flight to Dublin, Ireland, but they're a really good football program that should not really be evaluated much differently than they did before the game against Georgia Tech. They're a good football program. Mike Norvell's a good coach. Can they be elite, stay elite? I don't know. PJ Fleck's an excellent football coach. He's got a difficult situation in Minnesota. He has seen better days. Will he be able to reverse the trend? Most likely not. I think the odds are against him because of the expanded Big Ten and because of the difficulty he's in trying to reverse trends now. Although his most recent recruiting classes have been better than what he was able to get early on in his Minnesota career. It's about finding playmakers and finding a quarterback. If he could put together the offensive line and the defense with a quarterback, find one guy, as I mentioned the other day, as I mentioned 5 minutes ago, I think, there are 30 or 35 good quarterbacks in this country. Not great. There may not be any great quarterbacks in college football in 2024, but there are 30 or 35 capable quarterbacks. He, based on what we saw last night and what we saw the last couple of years, hasn't had one of those guys. So he needs to find, you would think at the University of Minnesota, for as difficult and for as much as I'm defending and making excuses for the recruiting situation, you should be able to find a quarterback, because there are a group of 5 quarterbacks who are better than what they've had at Minnesota. So get yourself a group of 5 quarterback. They've had quarterbacks at the likes of Western Kentucky and, of course, Coastal Carolina and Liberty and other places. Get one of those guys and sell them on the fact that they can play in the Big Ten, they can play in the big stage. They're going to be protected by an excellent offensive line, and we are not going to be running the outdated, antiquated passing offense that we've run for the last 5 years. We are going to update, and we are going to let you throw the ball more than 20 times. That's what PJ Fleck needs to do. And then he needs to find a couple playmakers that aren't the 120th rated wide receiver out of the state of Florida. He needs to find them somewhere. Just 2 or 3 guys to catch the ball and 1 guy to sling it. He's not been able to do that. Otherwise, he's running a really good football program that is in a downswing. Will they bounce back? My guess is no, but I would not bet against PJ Fleck. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. And we've got a Clemson show at 5:30. And we've got the post game tonight after all the games. There isn't a great slate of games. Michigan State lines up against FAU, and there are a few other games out there, but we'll show up to take your calls tonight after Friday Night Football right here at the Voice of College Football. College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly Under the Radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.